Olivier Stankiewicz.
Yep, perfect.
Okay. We're here today with the principal oboist of the London Symphony Orchestra, Olivier Stankiewicz. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
So Olivier Stankiewicz came to visit my university early this year, and I was so excited to get to learn from him. We weren't able to connect for an interview while he was visiting because there was just a lot going on. He was premiering pieces, there were concerts, so we got to spend some time together. He gave a masterclass, but he was also so nice to let me ask him some questions over Zoom once things had settled down and he was back in London. Olivier plays principal oboist in the London Symphony Orchestra, which is one of the most famous orchestras in the world. Before that, he studied at the Paris Conservatory under David Walter.
Yeah, David Walter. No,
Yes.
It's actually David Walter. He's very French.
And if you want to learn more about his journey into the oboe world, you should subscribe below to check out the second video. It's going to be a two-parter where he talks about more of his oboe journey and audition tips and this kind of thing. This video is going to focus more on the kind of spirit of his playing and things that I learned from him in that regard.
How much time each day do you spend making reeds?
These days, I know this might shock you, but I used to work in an orchestra in Toulouse, which the principal oboe, the former principal oboe, stepped down to second when I got my position. That's why there was an opening, and he had this ethos. He would make something like 15 or 16 reeds a year. Yeah, and now he sounded incredible. He was an absolute star. In fact, the two professors at the Paris Conservatoire regarded him as the best principal oboe in France. His spirit was that whatever he had in the box, he needed to sound the same. And I think I found that quite inspiring. Of course, in practice, it's not. It's what I'm saying is that it's a balancing act, and that a lot of it's great to be able to cope with different reeds. Now, why I say that I don't spend so much time making reeds. First of all, I think European reeds last a little bit longer as well. So there's a bit more wood on them. And the second thing is that these days I actually don't even make my own reeds. I made them until last summer. I used to start from brocade and do it all. And I still believe that that I preferred the reeds that I would make myself. But at this stage, I found a guy that makes I think really great reeds. They may be 80% as good as what I can make myself. But the amount of stress that it takes off the process and the amount of time that I get from not having to make my reeds, and that I appreciate hugely, right? So I'm not shy of saying this because ultimately I think that our artistry is not the reeds we make, is what we do with them.
So I think my favorite takeaway from just interacting with Olivier and hearing him talk about music and playing the oboe was his approach to practicing as like a holistic practice. I loved the way he talked about the mind-body connection and just a spiritual approach to practice and the art form in general.
In the moment, it's relevant.
Yeah.
In the moment, I found it to be relevant for other students, and this is also something for you when you try. As a student, I always would invent my own exercises, and I really encourage you to do that. And also, if you do an exercise and after a while spending at the exercise, if it's not really working, I just change. Right? I try to not kind of egg on something that's not working, and because I need to keep it interesting and somehow. I love doing yoga. I try to do as much as I can. Of course, that also varies, but I find it really interesting in how it ties in with the playing, trying to recapture some of the sensations. For example, things like tree pose and so on really kind of seem to prepare us for playing very nicely.
I remember you talking a little bit about the body issues in the masterclass you gave at UT, and like kind of getting your body to work for you musically.
You know, I like that, and actually, when it comes to to using the body, I would say I'm on a journey too, right? It's like I don't have the answers, and frankly, I don't have the body of a yoga teacher. Far from that, and neither in terms of flexibility or strength or appearance or whatsoever. But I think it's really about understanding more how things connect, right? What giving, understanding the direction to give to your body, understanding the direction to give to your movements, what to use, right? Rather than how much of it, because in fact we don't use a big range of mobility when we play.
So Olivier is, of course, world famous for his oboe playing and for playing the standard works in the orchestra, as well as for the solo oboe. But he's also a huge new music guy. He premieres a lot of new music and explores the extended techniques of the oboe, which I find very fascinating. You have a lot of experience working on new music and music that's freshly composed. Could you talk about how you got into that world and what that looks like in your career now?
So how I got into that, it's quite funny. I one day someone turned up in the oboe class in the conservatoire I was studying in at the time, and said, "Well, someone from the composition department has written an oboe piece. Is there someone who wants to play this?" And people kind of looked away a bit and stuff, but it just sounded exciting to me. I didn't know about the specifics of new music or anything like that. I was just generally curious and said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And that was the beginning of a great friendship with that composer. Actually, he ended up writing a concerto for me later, and I loved the process. I loved working on it, and also at the time, someone told me, "Oh, there's this great module called Musical Culture of the 20th Century." Only problem with that class is that it started at 8 a.m. and I lived about 50 minutes from the conservatoire. So if I want, but that class was fantastic. It was led by this incredible woman called Corinne Schneider, and every week she would take a composer from the 20th century or a topic, and she would elaborate on it, and she would have guests, also composers coming to talk to the class. And I think that a lot of the resistances towards new music, a lot of the resistances come from just ignorance, clearly, from understanding if you understand where it's coming from, then of course it starts making sense, and it becomes very interesting. And also, so there's this, and also being close to the people who make it, is to understand that the composers are humans just like you and me, and that they're not dictators that sit there with a pencil and like with every drop of ink they put on the paper that is going to make you suffer because you won't be able to play it, or because it's going to sound dissonant and so on. But to understand that it's a process, and that they chose to make it a certain way, and that if you're a performer and you're going to premiere a piece, you can hopefully, depending on who you're working with, but for me it's always been the case that you can talk about things. Say, "Oh, look, this maybe this just doesn't work so well, but then we could do something slightly different." Or I mean, my approach is trying to not change things at first. I try as hard as I can to get where the composer wants. But if I can't get there after, say, a reasonable tryout, then I try to suggest something different, or I try to see if their idea can be executed in a more suitable way on the instrument, or something like this. And then it continued. Basically, in the next conservatoire, I always, as I said, I'm very interested in analysis, and I entered this class that was an analysis class that was catered mostly to composers. So there were 9 hours a week. There was three hours lessons per week of that in analysis, and you had to attend 2 of these. So you could choose. And one of these, I think, Wednesday morning was always new music, or I would say music written after 1945. So that's and it was led by a composer as well. So he had that insight on the music that he would always, even if he would analyze some Mozart or some Beethoven, he would always try to get into the mindset of the person who wrote it and understand that what is the compositional problem that was at play in that situation? Why is this the music in this way? And this has really, really influenced me as a performer. Really, this is how I grew as an interpreter, is to try and get into the mindset of the composers. And so new music, my experiences in new music are sort of really indissociable from any other music.
Olivier is also a huge proponent of improvisation, which, as you know, is very close to my heart. He is an advocate for improvisation as a performance practice, but also as a key part of a musical education.
Really, in that respect. And then also there was the improvisation. That's maybe the other approach. Is that I did a lot of improv when I was a student in Paris, and again, then suddenly you have to become a composer, but a composer in the moment, right? So you don't have the control over the form unless you're playing alone, right? And if you play a solo improvisation and you have an idea of the form you were doing, you could almost say that means you've already composed something in your head before you start playing. But improvising is sort of, it's very much thinking in terms of an orchestrator, right? If you're with a group of people, there's a whole harmonic spectrum that is there. Where are you going to enter, right? How is what you're going to do going to interact with the other people that play? So that was a very practical, very hands-on approach of music making. But that also connects a lot with the music, also through the extended techniques, because the vocabulary in improvisation is endless, and so all that exploration on the instrument that you also in the moment you figure out incredible sounds. Then is the hard bit is to try to reproduce them later, whatever you were doing in that session. It can be quite tricky, but basically you develop a versatility on the instrument. You start to create your repertoire of sounds, and a lot of the sounds that I found while I was improvising are the sounds that then have been incorporated in pieces that were written for me later.
It really breaks the boundaries of the instrument, because the top note we play on the oboe may be B flat or C and stuff, but when you're improvising, you can really go to the
it's a whistle tone
of the human ear, right? And unfortunately, on the low sounds on the oboe, we're a bit limited, but trying to figure out what.
Stick a toilet paper roll in there.
Sorry?
You can stick a toilet paper roll in there.
Yeah, no, you can.
Yeah.
You can, of course. And then also you start to realize that, like what we're talking about in the all these techniques we're talking about I did a class for the composers, and that all these extended techniques, they're not in separate boxes, right? There's a continuity in between them. The continuity is the continuity of your body and the continuity of the instrument. If you play an A, right? You play an A, you add this finger, this is bisbigliando, you add this finger, it's a quarter tone, you add this finger, it's a multiphonic, right? So you start to understand that very subtle changes, extremely subtle changes can create a big difference, acoustically speaking, right? You understand that the instrument is a succession of zones of stability and of instability. Acoustic stability, when we play a note, it's a stable thing. When we play something else, these whistle tones that I was playing earlier, they are much less stable.
Olivier's energy for working with new composers is palatable. I'm hoping to bring some of this energy with me as I work with composers to premiere new works, to improve the diverse perspectives in classical music at the Idahos Conference in Boulder, Colorado this summer. If you're watching this in early June, you can actually help us make this a reality by contributing to the Kickstarter, which is linked in the description below. Thank you so much for your generous support. So actually, my first encounter with Olivier's playing was years ago on YouTube. I remember specifically seeing him playing a Mozart sonata. It was an arrangement, beautiful phrasing, but something that stuck out with me was something he was doing with his thumb. And I had seen the English thumbplate system before, so many people are familiar with that, but this was something a little bit unique. So of course I had to ask him about it. I'll let him explain.
So that's a key. It's basically just a prolongation of this. Well, that's my top joint. So it's just basically a prolongation of this big rocker.
Is it okay to play here or
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
It's just it's for the sound really.
Right.
It's this key is just used in the concerto system. It's just used as a prop to lift these two guys up, and in fact, acoustically speaking, it's got nothing to. It's not a good key for the C. That's why it's nasal and empty often.
Is this a custom build for you, or does Marigo kind of have these ready to go?
Yeah, well, you know, it is, but when you go to, that's what I like about Marigot is that it's very family-like feeling. I'm friends with the technicians, and even when I was a student, you know, if I asked about something, they would do it. It's a very friendly maker. So the normal, the C is, and this one. Yeah, it's nicer. Yeah, and it works a lot for B flat, but the B flat, which is the English B flat, I don't like it. So the concerto B flat is better. But basically, what you could think is that we need to lift these two to be able to play a C and a B flat. And basically, the French makers and the English makers, they made a different decision. The French makers, they choose to have a half, a not so good C, but a good B flat. And the English makers, they chose to have a good B flat, and no, a good C natural, but not a bad B flat. That's about what it is really. And I mean, this is okay, but it's not great because either because, for example, that slurring action is a bit awkward. I think ideally I'd like to have a little roller here, but
Hit up Marigo, right?
yeah, I mean, I've said it, but you know they did it. So I mean, they're quite busy as well, so I don't want to take too much time.
You're using the system like after you moved to UK or before?
Oh, that's a good question actually. Yeah, or right before. I started. It's you know there's this bit in the Rite of Spring that they always go. And I was coming in as a guest at the time I was on trial, and I just noticed that my C just didn't blend with it. So I played it like this, but this is of course you can only play one note really.
Oh, yeah.
So then I asked for the extension, yeah. But I mean this is for places like it's really great.
So it's interesting to see. I think in the history of instrument making, basically, I think the French probably chose to have a good B flat, but a C that wasn't so great. In the English, they chose to have a great C and a B flat that wasn't so great. It's interesting. They just made a different choice.
It's pretty cool. Well, I don't want to keep you from calling your mom. So
No problem.
But thank you so much again. It's
You're
really
welcome.
awesome to hear
You're
your
welcome.
view of the oboe world.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Take care, Danny.
Bye.
Bye.